Hey everybody, Jake here and welcome to The Hobby. We are on our third Q&A where you guys ask me questions on Pokemon card collecting and investing in general, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Hopefully it'll be interesting to you, so let's get started. Our very first question comes from Eddie, and I think another dozen people also asked this, and that is, what are 5 modern Pokemon card sets that would be good to invest in that are moderately priced? I think he edited the question to add in the moderately priced part. And I think I did a video around 6 months ago where I listed like top 10 of the best modern Pokemon card sets that you should consider investing in, and I think that list is still really solid, but unfortunately a lot of the booster boxes on that list have gone up too much. Mainly the tag team sets like Cosmic Eclipse, Team Up, and Unified Minds all did really well, and I expected that because the tag team cards are just really great, but those sets are all in danger of being reprinted. I think it's almost really confidently say that they will probably be reprinted sometime in 2021, most likely. So what are some other moderately priced modern Pokemon card sets? Sword and Shield has been really lackluster. There hasn't been any real set that have really wowed me. But I think there's still some solid one. Darkness Ablaze isn't too bad. Vivid Voltage looks to be really good. If you don't like those, you can still find Hidden Fates. I think Hidden Fates is a great set. Champion's Path would be solid long term as well. Pretty much all the holiday sets have done really well long term, and I expect them to continue to do really well. So those are 4 good sets right now that are still probably fairly moderately priced, especially Champion's Path and Hidden Fates, since both of those Elite Trainer boxes are going to be reprinted, so you can probably snag them up for pretty cheap in the upcoming months. Rianu Keeves asks, what is your opinion on Collectible Guru? If you guys have ever played the game Among Us, I would say that Collectible Guru is highly sus. From the videos that I've seen he was in, I would say that the guy does not come up anywhere near close to being an expert, and he's clearly trying to portray himself as a Pokemon card expert. I personally don't know him, but I would say yes, the guy is highly sus. I mean, the whole entire part where he said first edition base set Bulbasaur is $30,000, that has become a meme in the hobby, and well deserved. In general, I can see where he's coming from. He hasn't been around in the Pokemon card hobby as long as he would like to say. And even the name, right, Collectible Guru, he's clearly trying to portray himself as someone who is an expert. And I can understand why. He's probably trying to get a very high group of high-end clienteles, you know, like some really rich people. Maybe someone who's a millionaire who's looking to get some first edition cards, and they want to go through and maybe purchase some from him. So he's sort of like a middleman, and he's trying to cash in on that. So I can see where his vantage point is coming from. Yeah, but I would say the guy is highly sus, and he's not someone that I would really care for an opinion of in the hobby. Although I'm not someone to gatekeep, you know. I'm not gonna say like, oh, you're not a true collector if you do this or that or something like that. Just someone that I would not really care for the opinion or care what they think about or really seek out their attention from in the hobby in general. Caitlin asks, how much do you recommend the average person put into buying Pokemon cards as a hobby or investment? That is a great question, and believe it or not, I actually consider myself extremely average in every single way. I have an average job, an average home, everything is really average with me. In general, I'm much closer to a college student than a millionaire, and I do think that it's very possible to add Pokemon card collecting and investing into your general portfolio, and I would love to do a really in-depth video on this topic someday. But I think for collectibles, it's fine, especially if you're young, to have, say, 10 to 20% of your investment portfolio in collectibles like Pokemon cards. I think that's totally fine, especially when you're young, because collectibles are high risk, but there are some crazy high returns in the world of collectibles. As you get older, you probably don't want to take as much risk, but in general, I think 20% or 10 to 20% of your total investment. So it just depends on you. If you're putting away $10,000 a year, then I think it's totally fine to have 1,000 to 2,000 of that in collectibles like Pokemon cards, especially when you're young, because that's when you have some more leeway to be really risky. So yeah, I think there's some serious room even for an average collector. Aaron asks, is it worth investing in base set unlimited for profit in the near future? English or Japanese base set? That is super tricky because of the way the question was worded. In general, base set unlimited is really solid, it's very affordable, and it has done really well, and that's because it's base set. You know, base set will always do well because it's the original Pokemon card set, it's the most iconic set. Everyone recognizes that base set Charizard is such an iconic Pokemon, but you also say in the near future, and that is super tricky because Pokemon card prices right now are very volatile. It's really hard to predict the future. It's really hard to predict even a stock. You know, most people don't even think that we can do a good job of predicting stock or bond portfolios, let alone collectibles like Pokemon card. That is so incredibly hard. I hold my stuff for 10 to 20 years because in the long term, I think it will do well. But in the near future, it's really hard to say. It's very possible that someone like Logan Paul could throw out 2 or 3 more videos and the hobby just continues to do amazing. Or we could experience a more mellow out period. So in the near future, I can't really say if you can really flip Pokemon cards, but base set is really solid as a long-term collectible. Kevin asks, how do you stay caught up on Japanese cards? I never know about their promos and stuff like that. I stay caught up because I am very deep in the hobby. I live and breathe it. I pretty much follow every single Pokemon news source. I follow every single social media platform. I'm on the Pokemon subreddit. I'm on multiple Pokemon Discord. I follow pretty much everything, and that's how I get like caught up on all this stuff. And I try to combine all this stuff and provide it back to you because I know most people can't afford to do that, right? You can't afford to live, breathe Pokemon 24/7. So that's why I tried my best to figure out what would be the best information and really retain it and provide it back to you guys. But in general, I think the Japanese promos is what you're asking about, and there's over 160 of them for Sword and Shield already. And most of them have been really lackluster, I'll be honest. With 160 promo, most of them are not very special. We've only had a couple of really unique cards that I think are really cool. Stuff like Shibuya Pikachu, we got the VMAX Pikachu, we have the Illustrator Charizard, and we also have like the 2 big ones. I think a couple of audience members say that they actually won these, so congratulations, shout out to you. This is the Charizard V Full Art and the Rainbow Rare Charizard V Max. Both of these in the Japanese promo form are extremely expensive. I think the Full Art Charizard V is going for around $2,000 and the Rainbow V Max is going for $5,000 plus. And the big reason for that is because they are trophy cards in Japan rather than promos or set cards as we have them in English. So these cards are really hard to get. Even the Rainbow V Max, there's only 1,000 copies of them and very few people actually have them in their collection, and most people are not selling them. So that's why they're so expensive. But in general, out of 160 promos, we've only seen like 5 or 6 really good ones from the Japanese promos. Katie asks, thinking of sending my first cards to PSA. One is a shiny Charizard GX from Hidden Fates. At what price level should I submit the card for? And this is definitely one of the more confusing things. In general, you can go as high as you would like in terms of payment. So the higher the level, you're probably going to get more express service. Your card will come back to you a lot faster. If you pick their value service, which is $10, that card could take a year or 2 to come back at this point. But if you take their express service, I would probably expect it back in 1 to 2 months. And in general, the prices for what you value your card is when you send it in is mainly for insurance purposes, right? Because if you value your card at $500, if it goes missing or damaged, then they know how much to pay you. So in general, you can go as high as you would like for your card. And I would most likely price my card at whatever the raw value of that card is. So if I have a near mint shiny Charizard GX from Hidden Fates, then I'd probably value it around $500. It would not make the cut for their value service, so you most likely have to go through their standard $50 service or something more express. But in general, that's why they set the prices for these levels, is for insurance purposes. Jeremy asks, would you recommend CGC for cards like Charizard from XY Evolutions, or save those high hitters for PSA? This is definitely very tricky. If you have the Charizard from XY Evolution, I actually recommend that you should probably send it into PSA, because as I understand it, there is a lot of hype right now between the XY Evolutions Charizard for PSA, and the big reason is because it's a very hard card to get a PSA 10 of. The print run for XY Evolution has always been a little bit wonky, and the PSA 10 XY Evolution Charizard is going for well over $5,000 right now. Don't quote me on an official price because prices fluctuate all over the place, but it is a very expensive card. I don't think a CGC Pristine 10 will command the same price as a PSA Charizard from XY Evolution, and that's mainly because of the notoriety behind the card. It's just so popular as a PSA 10. There's so many people looking for it in a PSA 10. But for other cards, I think especially once you go down to a PSA 9 or CGC 9, the prices start to become a lot more equivalent, right? Because for the PSA 10 Charizard, it's a really luxurious card. So when you're a millionaire, you're really willing to be nitpicky. You have the freedom to be nitpicky and get the card that you want. But if you're looking for, you know, some value cards that bring more value, then you're not going to be as nitpicky if you don't have a lot of money to float around. You're going to be looking at a PSA 9 Charizard or CGC 9 Charizard. You're probably fine with either. So certainly for lower end cards, I would recommend CGC. I think most people would not care between the two slabs. But for specifically the XY Evolutions Charizard, which is what you're asking for, I think PSA is your go-to, because if you get that PSA 10, that is literally a lottery ticket in your hand, and it's going to be well worth it. Andrew asks, what other hobbies do you have other than collecting Pokemon cards? Do you collect other stuff like video games and action figures? And yes, I do collect a lot of other stuff. I also collect a bunch of video games, including, you guys see behind me, I have some of the graded original Pokemon Game Boy games. Those are really fun, and I really appreciate them because they are a piece from my own childhood. I also collect other stuff. I have some Funko Pops, but not too many, because you guys know if you collect Funko Pops, they take up a lot of space really fast, really quickly. And I only have a couple. I really like Avatar: The Last Airbender, so I have a bunch of authenticated autograph Avatar Funkos. I have Zuko autographed by his voice actor. I have Sokka autograph. I have Jesse Flower, who voices Toph. So those are some of the nice pieces. I also collect a bunch of vinyl records. I have a signed record of the original cast recording of Hamilton, and it's signed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. So that's one of the nice pieces. I also have a lot of graded comic books from CGC. That's how I know them from. So yeah, a lot of really interesting stuff that I collect, and I think I'll continue to dabble around with a lot of other collectibles. Phil asks, hi Jake, given the recent rise in prices, do you think Pokemon is at risk of becoming more about investing rather than nostalgia or the pure enjoyment of opening up Pokemon cards? That is a great question, Phil, and I think it came up multiple times because I think a lot of people are worried that greed or too much investing talk is going to take over the hobby. And I am actually not too worried about that, because as I understand it, the vast majority of Pokemon cards are actually still purchased as toys and are disposed of. There's actually a very small group of people who take Pokemon collecting super seriously. I know it seems like a very large crowd, and the hobby has certainly been growing, but the vast majority of people are casual Pokemon card buyers. the Pokemon investor or a collector group is a very small minority group in the whole entire scheme of things. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. And we are probably going to continue to be the minority. There are very, very few people who actually take Pokemon card collecting very seriously. The vast majority of people just enjoy buying a couple products, opening up a couple packs, and sleeving up their cards, and that's pretty much the end of the story. The serious collectors are still a really small minority group, and we're gonna probably stay that way for a long time. James asks, Jake, if you had $1,000 to spend on Pokemon cards, what would you buy? That is a great question, James. I think a lot of people actually ask this. If I don't have a single Pokemon card and I had $1,000 and I want to purchase some Pokemon cards, I'll probably go with base set. I just want the original base set. That's a great starting point. And I think with $1,000, I could probably purchase the whole entire original base set and still have some money left over. So I would probably go to my local retailer like Target or Walmart and purchase whatever's available on the shelf. Maybe a GX collection or an Elite Trainer box, just to get a basic understanding of the hobby and collecting in general. But after that, I'll probably diversify and go into something a little bit deeper. But your question probably, it really just depends. And I know a lot of people ask me like, hey, should I invest in this? Should I invest in that? And in general, I usually ask some question backs to them because it really depends, right? Like it depends on your income level. It depends on your risk tolerance. It depends on how much you're willing to risk. One investment, the exact same card, can be a great investment for one collector and a terrible investment for the other. So for example, let's say we have a PSA 10 Charizard and it's going for $10,000. It's just a number. So let's say that card is going for $10,000, right? If you're a millionaire, that could be a really solid investment. Or even if your income is $500,000, that could be a sound investment because that's not too bad. It's not a huge portion of your income. But let's say you're making $30,000 a year. Now that's a terrible investment because it's too much risk. You can't handle that. So it really depends on the individual, right? There's just so many criteria. What are your long-term goals? Are you trying to hold this card for 20 years? Do you want to hold it till old age? Or do you want to flip it in a year? Your goals and what you're trying to get out really depends. So there's just a bunch of questions that I would ask the individual person. And I think this is something I would love to do, you guys. Maybe like sit down with some of you and just like go really nitpicky and give you some really sound advice based on your actual need. But that's not something that I have readily available right now. Maybe it's something I'll do in the future. Renee asks, is it good to invest in the Mario and Luigi boxes or cards even with the recent increase? And do you think they will be doing similar cards in the future, such as some more cosplay Pikachus? And those are actually some really solid cards. They're certainly some of my personal favorite cards, so I'm a little bit biased. But in general, I'm very happy with having them in my collection. You can see them right behind me, actually. I just remember that they actually have them up there. And they are really solid cards. I'm happy with how much they've grown in terms of value. And the interesting thing is the value that they've grown by, I think, is actually based around actual intrinsic interest from a bunch of collectors and investors, rather than something that is really based around hype, like base set Charizard, which spiked in value over the last couple of weeks because of Logan Paul's video. So that is something that I would say is unrealistic, whereas the Pikachu and Luigi boxes have been slowly climbing, but at a really solid pace, and they've done really well. So I really love them. And they will be doing more cosplay Pikachus, because Pikachu is the Pokemon company's mascot, and they love putting Pikachu in all kinds of different situations. One of the upcoming cards is the Kanazawa Pikachu, and that one is really gorgeous, and I'm definitely going to get some copies of that card. And I think it's a really solid card in the near future as well. So yeah, plenty of more Pikachus to come. NMK asks, do you think Pokemon prices will drop after COVID? Prices exploded during the summer and fall. And this is very interesting because I definitely think COVID influenced the prices on Pokemon cards. In general, Pokemon card collecting is just a really solid stay-at-home hobby. You can pretty much do every single part of the hobby from home. You know, you can watch a couple of YouTube videos, you can crack open a couple of packs. It's a very safe hobby to do at home, so that's one of the reasons why I think the hobby has really grown. But I think it's going to stick around, right? It's not something where if COVID disappears, people suddenly start disliking Pokemon cards. So that's the interesting thing, as when people join the hobby, I think they're going to stick around long term rather than leaving it after COVID or something like that. So yeah, interesting that COVID brought on a bunch of Pokemon card collectors, but I don't think they'll leave after this whole entire situation is over. Not Right asks, how do I convince my dad to invest in Pokemon cards instead of stocks? That's a funny one. But I was talking about the investment strategy a little bit earlier. So if he's your dad, it probably wouldn't be too weird to have 2 or 3% of his investments in collectibles. And he's probably going to prefer sports cards. So something like baseball cards or basketball cards. You might be able to slip in the interest through some sly means, like maybe you can say something like, hey dad, would you like to collect some baseball cards or basketball cards? Kobe Bryant passed away this year. Maybe we should get his rookie card or something like that. And then you should sort of slip in the lines like, oh, did you hear that this Charizard card sold for $220,000? You know, you slip in something like that and he hears about the heavy interest in the hobby. Maybe he'll be at least piqued interest to collect a couple of cards for you. So there you go, that's my advice. Haley's asked, hello Jake, thanks for all the useful content. I want to know how sealed product will appreciate in the next 10 to 20 years. And boy, is this a common question. So many people ask me what my prediction for the next 10 to 20 years is, and that is a minefield because it's so hard to tell. It's hard already to predict 1 year ahead, let alone 10 to 20. So let's do our best, okay? So what can we do? Even though it's so hard. I would say we have to look at historicals. Historicals are the best we got. So what is a Pokemon card set that is 10 years old? A 10-year-old Pokemon card set would be base set black and white. That is a 10-year-old set. It actually came out in 2010. We're into 2020, so it's a 10-year-old set. So what is the value of a base set a black and white booster box today? It's going for around $1,000 to $1,500. Originally, a base set booster box of black and white was selling for around $100, or give or take. And now it's going for over $1,000, so do the math. In 10 years, the return on investment is over 1,000%. That is certainly better than every single other traditional investment strategy that I can think of. Certainly a little bit more risky, but it comes with more reward. So that's the trade-off. So yeah, in 10 years, who really knows? But if you look at historicals, 1,000% return investment in 10 years is not out of the ordinary for the hobby at all. QZQ asks, what is your thought process when it comes to collecting Pokemon cards? I always watch your videos and you always seem to be able to collect awesome stuff. Where do you find these cool cards? And when it comes to Pokemon card collecting, I am very much a hype beast. I really focus on cards that I think are cool, are hot, are popular, and really out there. Cards like Mario Pikachu, cards like the Scream promos, cards that really push the boundaries of what it means to be a Pokemon card. I just love cards that are outside the box, right? They are some of my favorite cards. And this really comes back to my investment strategy when it comes to Pokemon cards, because I know I am a very high risk collector. I am a high risk, high reward collector, and this is not something I recommend for other Pokemon card collectors, but it's certainly something I do for myself because I just think it's fun. I have some very safe investments, right? I have a traditional 401k, I have a Roth IRA, so I have some very safe investments, which is why I think it's okay for me to have a very high risk investment when it comes to Pokemon card collecting. I like to go for the high risk, high reward because I have other safe investments that I'm totally fine with. So that's why I enjoy having these really high-risk part of the hobbies. And in general, I do have some very out there collectibles, but that's just me. I really enjoy cards that barely look like Pokemon cards. That just brings me the most joy. Raphael asks, how should I know whether to sell my Pokemon cards now or save them for later? How long should I wait? I am very much of the mindset of a long-term collector. I really think out there like 10 or 20 years. I'm a very long-term collector. I have very few Pokemon cards that I would flip or something like that. In general, it's very difficult to time the market, and I don't recommend anyone do that. You can't even time the market when it comes to stocks or bonds or other traditional investments. So it's even trickier when it comes to collectibles. We just don't know. You could sell your Pokemon cards today. Let's say you sell a bunch of fossil cards today, and tomorrow there's an influencer who opens up a fossil booster box and suddenly fossil cards are super popular now. You just don't know. The hobby does not follow a specific trajectory like other traditional investments. We just can't do something like that. And I try not to overthink it. If I have a card that I'm happy to sell and I'm willing to take the profit at the current price, then that's what I'll do. I have so many Pokemon cards that I've sold in the past that have gone up in value, that are worth way more today if I had just keep them. But I'm not too worried about that. I sold them for fair market value at the time of me selling them. So that's what I would recommend. Don't try too hard to time the market. You're just gonna keep yourself up at night and you're not gonna enjoy the hobby as much. So just really focus on collecting the cards you like and selling off the cards you don't whenever you feel like it. Don't try to crazily time the market or something like that. For our final question, we have Eddie who asks, is it ever too late to jump into buying and selling vintage or modern? Seems like prices are out of reach right now, and I understand where you're coming from, Eddie, and you're most likely looking at some very expensive Pokemon cards right now, like first edition PSA 10 Charizard, and thinking, wow, I can never get that card. But here's the thing, first edition Charizard was not the best highest growth card this year, not by a long shot. Realistically, first edition base set Charizard had a 200 to 300% return on investment this year, and I have many Pokemon cards in my collection that are in the 2000% return on investment rate right now, 2000% ROI. So I have many Pokemon cards that did exceptionally better than the most expensive Pokemon cards. The most expensive Pokemon cards are not the ones that are doing the best right now. And it's not something super specific, but yeah, I do have multiple both modern Pokemon cards and vintage Pokemon cards that have performed way better than these really expensive cards. There are cards in my collection that are 1 year old that went from $30 to $700 or $200 to $5,000. They do exist and it does happen, so don't worry too much about the price point. There are tons of cards that you can buy right now that are in the $200 range or $100 or even the $50 range that have plenty of room to grow in the future. So don't worry too much about the expensive cards. That is actually not where you'll see the most growth. So in general, yeah, I think there's plenty of room left in the hobby, and we're still going to continue to grow. Pokemon has not fully matured as a collectible hobby yet. We're doing really well. We're out of our infancy at the very least, I think, but we're not a fully mature hobby yet. We're certainly getting there, but yeah, there's still plenty of room for all kinds of excitement inside of the hobby. Alright everybody, that's the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that answering all these questions have at least given you some interesting insight into the hobby and some of my opinions. Most likely you probably won't agree with all of them, and that's totally alright. It just gives you some more discourse to really think about. And don't worry if I did not answer your question. I'll probably go back and reply to a bunch of your guys' questions over the next couple of days. So yeah, thank you so much for asking your question, and I hope this has been insightful, and I will see you guys next time.